Welcome to the PipeIQ Weekly AI Podcast, where we cover all the topics related to AI business acceleration. We are in the heart of Silicon Valley here at PipeIQ headquarters in Palo Alto, California. This is podcast number 2. My name is Eric Nilsson, and with me today I have my co-host Rajesh Karam. Today is Sunday, October 13th, 2024. Rajesh, how's it going?
Hey, fantastic, Eric. Thanks for asking. Amazing, fantastic, beautiful day actually outside. So.
Yes, it is a sunny California day in Palo Alto. Perfect weather, just in the low mid 70s all day today. You know, the heat wave's gone. Hasn't gotten cold yet. No rain. I'm a little bit worried about the drought in California coming back because it has been dry. It's already middle of October and we haven't seen a drop here in California. Right?
Yeah, so. I saw a little bit of. I thought I saw a little bit of drizzle on my windshield this morning when I was driving, but probably not. Yeah,
exactly. I think we did get some rain. I walked over to Pete's Coffee in downtown Palo Alto, and the streets were wet. So I take that back. We did get a little bit of a drizzle, and we're heading into November where the water starts to show up. So we'll get our winter like everybody else here. But it is today a beautiful day, and it is Sunday, and we're back for podcast number 2. On the show today, we're going to be talking about the human workflow changes that you have to adopt when you're adopting AI tools, right? So we'll talk about, what happens to the salespeople, what happens to the marketers when you start rolling out AI tools. So we'll talk about that. But before we get to that, we're going to get the news. We're going to get some news on what's been happening in AI since we did podcast number 1 last week. A lot of fun there. I will get to talk about the SpaceX launch this morning because that happened. I'm super excited about that, although that's not really about AI. But, you can't have a launch a Starship without at least mentioning it, right? Because that baby was landed on the chopsticks, so that's going to be fun. We'll talk about the news, then we're going to talk about what's happening in the industry around human workflow changes. Then we'll talk about PipeIQ. Then we'll get to what's keeping us up late at night this week, and we should be good to go. So hang with us for the next hour. We're going to cover those topics and probably a little bit more. So let's kick that off. So in the news, OpenAI to become profitable in 2029. Really? So, Rajesh, what's going on there?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's some very interesting news. First of all, their losses are going to triple by 2026, just 2 years from now. So at about 14 billion in losses. And they're going to be profitable in 2029, I believe. And the run rate at that time is going to be $100 billion. Dollars. Yeah. So like a massive company.
You know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of Amazon, right? The days of Amazon when they were selling books and they just kept losing money and losing money and losing money. And I don't think they ever really had a good model of how to make money. And you know how they actually ended up making money? AWS service, compute services, right? So they kept investing. They knew it was going to be something important, and I'm sure they make money on some of on the retail business right now. But if you look at the bulk of Amazon's money, it's actually coming from compute, right? Compute services. But I kind of feel like that's OpenAI is going to be in the same boat. They're investing in just a ton of infrastructure. Right. I'm not sure they know where all the revenue is going to come from, but they're projecting, we'll make money, 5 years from now. Right?
Yes. I mean, look, I think this is true of a lot of startups. I mean, as far as there's momentum, there's traction. I think investors are willing to, sort of bet on the baby, so to speak. So I think at $100 billion sort of revenue run rate, I mean, we're talking about at a 20-time multiple, we're talking about $2 trillion company. I mean, 2 or 3 trillion potentially. So the size of NVIDIA and Microsoft, like those likes, where they are today.
Is OpenAI public? Did they
IPO? No, not yet. Not yet. It's all private, backed by private investors, and they just raised, as we mentioned last week, they just raised a $6.6 billion round, led by Thrive Capital. Yeah.
So last week we talked about how much they raised. This week we're talking about how much they're going to spend
and how much they're going to lose.
How much they're going to lose and how long they're going to lose it. Right. Which I was talking to a guy that worked at IBM and has spent some time in AI, and he was actually talking to me about the fact that the money that everybody's putting in makes it hard for anybody else to stay in this business, right? Like that, people like PipeIQ, right, where there is such a long payout, right, that but from my and he's like, I don't know how people are going to survive. That was his point. His point was like, there's going to be a lot of people that wash out because the return on this stuff is going to take so long. But I don't think that's the case for small companies like PipeIQ and others, where you're actually providing value right now. We talked about Notebook LM last week, right, and that there's actually solutions that are happening, and I think that it's just OpenAI is such a big play on the whole LLM model, the big models that have to be generated, and all the medium models, small models, that they're just not in a hurry.
Yes. I mean, I think you can compare OpenAI to sort of a database play or a hyperscaler play, right? Like, so that's the sort of foundation on which a ton of other people, right? Like just like PipeIQ, I mean, applications that are being built on top of this, right? So I think at the application layer, the payoffs are far more clear, and customers expect a very clear ROI also, potentially in many cases, right? So I think the dynamics of the investment as well as the output and value creation is probably a little bit, the timelines look different.
Right. And then triple losses by 2026, 14 billion losses in 2025. They're just going to lose money. In the news, Cerebus, AI chip maker.
Yes.
They're going to go public.
Yes, they're going to go public. And I think, I mean, as we all know, there's a lot of demand right now for folks like NVIDIA. So I think Cerebus, their timing probably is pretty good, right, in terms of coming to the market and raising some more money there. They have a few competitors. I'm not super familiar with that space, but like, Samba Nova and there's a couple more others who potentially are in the,
Right. So this is a place where if you are an investor, you're listening to this and you want to go get in and get some money in the AI in the space where they're IPOing, this would be one. I can't say I've done any research on them to know what chips they're making, right, and who their customers are. I know Broadcom, where I work on a daily basis, they make AI chips and they're selling to Google and to Facebook and to others. And so again, it's that building custom chips to save power as opposed to using just a generic GPU, right? Like you build chips for specific functions, and then you just don't have a big generic massive GPU that you're spending a lot of money on.
Absolutely. I think there's so much activity happening even on the in the layer underneath these foundational models, which is the chip layer, right? Like so. I think we mentioned last week probably Grok raised $650 million, right? So that would be in the same sort of category of players, right? So yeah, certainly there is I think market appetite. Investor appetite.
And then in the news, we're always watching for what the government's doing, right? And talk of breaking up Google, right? Like as these guys get big enough, right, and they start to look like they're going to dominate the market, there's always going to be oversight and regulations. It reminds me of the Microsoft days back in the day. I don't think any of that's very successful. They always talk about it, right? I feel like what happens is the market tends to break these things up. Like look at Intel. Intel announced that they're going to spin off their fab business, right? So, or they're talking about spinning off their fab business, right? And the market tends to make that happen because somebody messes up, right? Or it gets too big to manage, right? And that'll be the question for OpenAI as they get too big and Google gets too big. Do they have to spin it off because it's just hard to manage, or you're competing with too many people, and so people don't want, if you're in the search business, I don't want to buy your chips because you're in the search business. That's right. So if you spin off your chip business, then your chip business doesn't have to compete with other customers that are in the search business or whatever that is, right? Like it's too big, right? And it gets complicated because people don't want to work with you, right? And you're a frenemy, right? When you're a frenemy, so some some of that happens. So I know they're talking about that, but who knows where that goes.
I don't know where it's going to go, but anyway, I think Google is in a little bit on the AI side for sure, is definitely on a bit of a defensive posture, right? Like so they need to leverage AI effectively, bring it onto the search without cannibalizing their AdWords business, right? Like the ad revenue. So I think they have a challenge at hand, right? Which of course I'm sure, right? Like completely they're focused on it, and that's front and center for them, right? Above all else, right? Other than of course, talking to the FTC or the European Trade Commission, etc., around being compliant around privacy and regulations. But
I think that Google is going to have a tough time of this, and here's my perspective of working in the Valley, living in Palo Alto. I would say that Google got lucky. They got search, right? Then they've made some good purchases, right? They bought YouTube, right? And that has been a boom for them. So now they have YouTube, they have Google search, and I think they made one other purchase that it doesn't strike me right now, but they've made like a couple purchases. But other than that, they've had a lot of they got the docs, like they got Google Doc, Google Mail, that kind of stuff. That's been successful, right?
Yes.
But if other than those three, I look at them and I go, man, they've had a lot of failures, right? And they kind of goof around. They get really into something, and like I feel like they're all over on the campus riding their little colored bicycles around and having a good old time and eating their free lunches. But the truth is, when it comes to something that you got to compete with, right? They've not, Google Glass got thrown away. They had their Google social media. I can't remember even what that was.
It was Google Plus. I think,
Google Plus,
that
right?
didn't go
Now it's going to go, they were going to do that. And Google Plus went nowhere. Google Glass went nowhere. And a handful of other Google APIs that I've written code to, are now gone as well. Google Podcasts went away, right? So I start making the checklist of where Google just wasn't serious and we're just goofing around, and then they get out of it. And this is not one of these places, right? And I think their first AI foray into the AI market was the same kind of thing. They rushed into it, and now they've had to rebrand it and rename it, and it sucked, and so they got a lot of bad press around it. And so I'm looking at them going like, this might be the adult room, and they're not going to be able to hang in the adult room.
I think it's I mean, definitely on the AI for sure. They've been they've been on the defensive, but like if you think somebody was telling me the other day like. Google Plus, right, had 80 million users, 80. So, but unfortunately, at the scale, Google scale, that's too small, right? Hey, we're gonna sort of shelve that business, right? So, I think there's this whole business, problem with economies of scale that Google needs, right, which many of these things will not meet, and even. I mean, G Suite, for example, right? I think is a decent business for sure. I don't know what percentage of the business. It's probably pretty small, right, relative to overall revenue that AdWords still is generating, or the search ads, right? So I think being now, I mean, again, this is classic.
Well, it's the innovator's dilemma.
Exactly, right? That's what I was going to say, right? Yeah, exactly. They're going to come up against that. So how do you show AI generated results right on your page,
without
and yet in fact,
destroying search?
Yes, or search for revenue rather, right? So,
that's what I mean.
Right, so that's going to be the big challenge, and then they might, I think what's going for Google is, they have all the search infrastructure, right? Like that's a big one, right? Like meaning anytime you hit APIs, right, with sort of search APIs, or not search APIs, but like Gen AI APIs, right? If you hit OpenAI API or Azure API or Gemini, right? One of the things when a search is sent, right, is there's some element of going and looking up on the web, right, what the output is. So I think Google will shine there because of their native search capability, right? So for OpenAI to match that, there's going to be some amount of work, and that's of course the partnership with Bing, right? Like so, but I think there's definitely an element of that coming into play here.
Yeah. And I think that gets us into kind of the topic that we want to talk about today. The winners for this is going to be the people that best onboard users and solve problems, right? What's the workflow that you have to come in and teach, a department how their job changes and how you're using this AI? It's one thing to use AI and it's cute and it's fun and it does stuff, but then ChatGPT, did very well at rewriting my documents, right? And all of a sudden I started, understanding the workflow of the next time I need to write a document. I just go to ChatGPT and I ask it to write the document, right? Same with Microsoft Copilot, right? I've learned that, if I'm writing code, they put it in Visual Studio. It's right there. It just writes the code for me, makes recommendations, has a pop-up. They've integrated into a known workflow for me, right? And so the winners for me are going to be the ones that look at the personnel, the worker, and then how do you best integrate that workflow. And I think that's what we wanted to talk about today, which is, the topic of human workflow changes while adopting AI tools, right? What do we have to do to get people? And there are different people that just kind of scoff at it and go, yeah, I'm not going to do that. I've been doing my job the same way for forever, and I'm not going to change it. Right. Then you get the younger generation who are like, I don't do anything on my own. I use my mobile app, or I use my my AI tools, and I'm gonna actually do that. Yeah. So if we look at Copilot, Microsoft Copilot, right, they've done the right thing when it comes to teaching people how to use. They took a brownfield, an app that already existed, and they've embedded it right in the GUI, and that's a straightforward model for changing human workflow. You don't really change it that much. It's an augmentation tool, right? Nothing really has to change, right? But I assume there are other ones like ChatGPT and lawyers that are needing to go rewrite documents. Right. You get into the legal coming back saying, and I'm surprised that Copilot doesn't get into this. Yeah. Legal comes back and say, wait, is that our code? Because I got that last week. Right. We were talking about code and we were talking about using Copilot and using ChatGPT. They're like, yeah, but wait. Whose code is that, right? Are we allowed to trademark that code, when we put it in? So now we're like, well, we need our own LLM model that we train to write our code for us so that we're not getting legally exposed to. So now that workflow changes, right? What are you allowed to do? What is, And so do you hear anything about that when you're talking in the
Absolutely. When we talk to customers, I mean, that's absolutely, one of the questions is one, people need auditability, right? Tell me how you got to this answer, right? Like even when you look up OpenAI, like ChatGPT, right? Like there's some references, right? That I think make the human more comfortable in terms of the fact that, okay, there's a output that I can know where it came from, right? So that's one. Second, I think is, as to your point, right? Like who owns, the IP if something is created? I think that's a big sort of open question, right? And that's currently being played out with copyright images, for example, right? Like, hey, when Dolly creates an image, right? Who actually owns it? Because it's been made from thousands of other artists. What has been created by them, right? So I think there's going to be some regulation, some technology around it to understand watermarking, to understand, right, what kind of attribution of royalties that we need to give, right? So that's on the creative side. On the code, I think definitely, right, if like a LLM knows everything about what code that's been written in open source and it generates a new piece of code, who owns it? I mean, that's, I think, a very,
My answer back when we were talking about this at the coffee table, was in Silicon Valley in Palo Alto. It was a coffee table up there at Pete's, and there's a bunch of guys sitting around talking. And, my position was, look, all the APIs are published, right? Like, and if then, well, all the language constructs are also published, right? So if the AI is capable of figuring out what I need the API, I don't need a Java doc now to go figure out what API is, and I don't need to figure out if then while else the constructs and then linked lists or whatever, that the AI knows how to do that. I don't think there's any IP there. I think that's just that's the compiler structure. That's the API structure. And then it's just gluing those together because I asked it to solve a problem. So my position was, I don't think there's any copyrightable, trademarkable, anything there if all you're doing is gluing together, functional capabilities in the language and the API constructs published by a vendor that gives me the APIs.
I think again, I think the IP may actually come in where context comes in, right? Like if that code is generated in the context of your GitHub repo, suddenly now, right, like there's a different intelligence of the code that's been created, right? Like, or not just intelligence, but quality of the code that's been created. Now, there, I think the question of IP, etc., will come in a more cogent fashion. Is kind of my take, right? But I'm not.
I guess if it's learning a way to solve a problem that no one has solved, and then they ripped it off from somewhere on the internet, right? And then that is copyright or trademarkable like that.
Yes. But also, that is copyrightable, trademarkable, but even within your own repo, right? Like if it's learning something about how you've written the code and pulling that in and creating the code, potentially, I think, there's some IP sort of claims you can potentially make. But it's going to be super interesting. I think I think there's definitely regulations coming around this that we should watch out for.
I'm not buying it. I'm not buying any of it. I think that's just lawyers looking to keep their jobs.
Right.
In the end, yes. I just don't buy that, And then over time, more and more will be AI generated, and there'll be less and less IP done by humans that it'll steal, right? It'll just start becoming a brain. Like, when does it become a smart enough brain that it's generating its own ideas on how to solve algorithms? And it kind of already does that from my perspective. I don't think it's stealing all that much, right? I think it's just smart. I think it's just learned how to write code.
Yes.
So maybe not, right? Like, I don't know.
I mean, I think emergent behavior, right? That's the whole question. So I think there's more and more emergence is kind of what we are looking for. And I mean, whatever, AGI is probably a little bit farther out away, but you see some glimpses of that already, right? Like when it writes up something, it's like, wow, how did you know? Or how did you come up with that kind of thing, right? Like, so it's always something that comes up. But if we back up though, I mean, Eric, your question around workflows and how does this fit in, right? Like, I mean, I was thinking of, when you mentioned the legal example, I was thinking of Harvey AI, right? Which is a legal tech startup. And I mean, one of the things I think they or another legal tech startup went out with to show like a demo, right? Was taking Enron emails, right, that are in the public domain from Enron's lawsuit, right, when they went bankrupt, take those emails and then show how the AI can actually crunch all of that. And what would take a lawyer 5 days to do right now is able to be sort of orchestrated within like 2 minutes or 5 minutes. You have a summary, you can query, the whole database of emails, and what it has, it doesn't have. So, but now the question is, if it's a separate tool, where I have to go, right? I mean, if there is enough value for me, then I will go in there and do that work. But ideally, right? I mean, I don't know enough about lawyer workflows, right? But yeah, if you work for a large law firm, and of course you're billing your hourly rate is something super high, right? Yeah, you probably want to stay within where you are and be able to use the output from the AI. So I think even what I'm seeing in sort of GTM tooling, right, is the incumbents, of course, right, are going to try to integrate AI within their existing tooling, right, which is not AI native, AI first. So that's sort of a natural approach for them. For AI first players, I think there's an opportunity to build something super new, totally different, right? But at the end of the day, you want to be as closely aligned to where the user is and his workflow, daily workflow, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and last week I talked about the idea that maybe Greenfield will be the way to go, right? The new apps that come into this market. But now I'm thinking about it and spend a little time talking to people. I'm like, also people that have apps, maybe it's easier from a process perspective to look at existing apps and then build it into it, right? And that they might have a workflow advantage, right? Because you don't have to teach anybody a new tool.
Right.
You just let the AI take over functions, pieces of the tool, like Copilot, right? Where it'll just start doing more and more of your coding tasks, right?
Yes.
And so it is interesting. But then you have Notebook LM, where it's a totally brand new capability that there is no tool to build that. Then all of a sudden a new tool makes sense.
A new tool. I mean, again, what's going to be interesting is, let's say you're a content creator, you're a marketer, right? And if, let's say, PipeIQ or another startup comes along and says, hey, I'm going to use Notebook LM to generate a particular capability. Now, where would be the best place to expose, right, whatever magic you do with Notebook LM? Is it going to be an entirely new interface? Or maybe I bring it into, the product marketer's workflow, for example, right, and provide it for him or her there, right? Like, so I think, and this is kind of unfolding in multiple areas, right? So if you are an existing incumbent, let's say Salesforce's install base is pretty large, right? So if you're a Salesforce user on the sales side, and at PipeIQ, in fact, right, like there's a bunch of things we write back to Salesforce, right? A pull from Salesforce, but we also write back to Salesforce, right? And that's a logical thing to do, because if a salesperson is already spending a lot of his or her time in Salesforce looking at read records, opportunity records, and so on and so forth, it makes sense to sort of expose some of the functionality there. But on the other hand, there might be things, right, where you would want the user to sort of gradually pull him into your interface, right? and it might make sense in certain cases to do that as well.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I can see that. I can see that. I guess it'll be different per industry, per place, per piece of code that's written.
Right.
Where this plays in. I like the new functionality role. I like the idea that if it's brand new and it's there, that then let's teach people a new function, right? And then you bring in and I think I'd look at PipeIQ where you guys are automating or giving field salespeople a brand new feature, right? A new tool. Then it makes sense that that's just going to be something you're going to have to teach the salesperson, right?
Yes.
And we did this a few years ago with social selling, right? Social selling was, hey, social tools are out here. This is a way you can connect with a customer, right? And so we had social selling website. We went to our 100 club where we have a weekly a sales kickoff where we bring everybody together, and it's 100 club goes to why, but we have a yearly sales kickoff where then we would do social selling training, right? And we brought salesmen in and set up their LinkedIn profile and taught them how to do that, did photo headshots with everybody new, and then did sessions on what does it mean to look in LinkedIn and follow people, right? You know where it went? Nowhere, right? Nowhere, right? It didn't go anywhere, right? Even though it's a very valuable way to, increase your social circle to be able to sell to, in the end, it didn't help.
So what went wrong there, you think?
Right. It was too much of a change for a salesman. Salesmen are not typically social media advocates, right? They're not sitting going, oh, let me take a picture of myself and follow 17 more friends. And they're much more of like, let's get a circle of big companies and I'll get to know the people by calling them and saying hello. And even though social would help you make that connection, LinkedIn would help you make that connection. They were just too busy doing their selling job, and they were good at their selling job, and so they didn't want to have to adopt that new process. And so that failed. Right.
Yeah. No, that's a very interesting example. I think social selling, for example, is not really going away. But on the other hand, right, like if as a salesperson you have a quota to meet and you have to bring in a certain level of opportunities and so on and so forth. So you have to build pipeline. Now, social selling in and of itself is a little bit not deterministic, probabilistic.
But I don't think salesmen build pipeline.
Right, that's true.
They close pipeline.
Yes, that's true.
They get the pipeline from somewhere else,
right?
And then they're good at calling them and taking them to dinner and taking them golfing or doing whatever they have to do to establish that one-on-one relationship that shows the value of what they're selling. Right. So again, then there's tools that hit pipeline, that generate pipeline. Then
like PipeIQ.
Like PipeIQ.
Yeah.
But then that gets filtered in and you hand it off to a salesman who then does his traditional calling and engaging, So maybe that's where PipeIQ is really in the lead gen space.
Yeah, lead gen, and also, I mean, I think the lines are blurring now between, again, I mentioned this last time, but like, sales and marketing tooling and process is all undergoing a massive change now because of AI, right? I really think so. A lot of things that a sales guy used to do now maybe can be taken over by a demand gen person or a campaign manager.
Right. I almost feel like PipeIQ really does get into the marketing function more than it does the sales automation, right? And I'm guessing at that because I don't really know.
So I think there's two parts, right, that we talk about, right? At the top, lead gen, you have sort of cold outreach, completely cold. Nobody knows about that person doesn't know about the brand. You have to reach out to that person, right? And sort of convert to a meeting, right? Like that's a like a longer, harder hill to climb, I guess, right? On the other hand, if let's say you have some first-party data, the person comes to your website, is familiar with the brand, has seen an ad, etc., right, and does some actions that qualifies him as what is called as a marketing qualified lead, for example, as an MQL, right? Now, going from an MQL to a meeting is a different sort of motion, right? And requires a different approach. And now, in that phase, the what is called as SDR, sales development reps or business development reps are involved, right? And that's the frontline sales guys, so to speak, right? People picking up the phone and making those phone calls, right? Following up on emails, adding people to sequences and so on, right, to generate and elicit a response and engagement. So that's the front end of that sort of sales cycle. Then an account executive sort of takes it over.
Yeah, takes it over.
Takes it over.
You're engaging with that front end.
Yes, in the front end cycle, right? That's kind of where we are starting from, right?
Midway into the funnel. Right?
That's right. That's right. Midway into the funnel. That's exactly it, right? So, and then, right, we'll, of course, I mean, we have a long roadmap with a bunch of exciting things up ahead. But so that's exactly where we deal with right now from an SDR perspective, and try to move it to a meeting.
Nice. So, okay, so we're teasing apart the workflow in the automation space, right? And you have different levels of the funnel that that can be attacked by using AI. The ones that are at the top of the funnel, the AI makes sense. There's no human change. There's not a lot of human change. It's just a marketing tool. It's automation, and you're not really you're requiring someone to use a new tool, but at the top of the funnel, we're using tools all the time. Right? That's not a big deal. It's when you get down closer to the salesperson automation, right? That then handing them off some kind of lead that was generated through AI versus generated through a different way. Yeah.
So I think one thing, if you're a CMO or a CRO, right, doesn't matter, both on the sales and marketing side, you are always dealing with a deluge of tools, right? Different tools, right? And there's there's definitely been a SaaS sprawl over the last 10, 15 years, right? So you have all of these tools sort of stepping on each other's toes, overlapping capabilities, etc., right? And so today, I mean, at least my play, PipeIQ play, and overall point of view is that more of a platform approach, right? Where you build something that cuts across multiple tool capabilities, thanks to AI, right? And build something that can potentially obviate the need for, 5, 7, 10 other tools, right? That's kind of the platform idea, how I approach it. So from a CMO or a CRO perspective, yes, people use top of funnel tools all the time, but it is, at the end of the day, it is still a behavioral change, right? If you're in a Marketo or Eloqua or some other legacy tool, right, where you're sending out thousands of templated messages, right, like one email going out to 10,000 people with some very superficial personalization, right, like around the first name or subject line and things like that, that's completely now changing, right? And we can also look at this from a other side, right? Like if you are like a prospect, right, who's being sold to, now what does AI mean for you as a prospect? So am I going to just be bombarded with a bunch of AI generated messages, right? Like where is the human touch, authenticity, connection, right? Believability, and so on and so forth. So those are some of the other questions that will have to be addressed as well.
So one of the things that strikes me is anybody looking at training in this space, right? Like do sales teams actually go for training like we did with social selling, right? I don't know. And then I got to ask, like, I wonder where Salesforce is in this process, right? Because they have to deal with this as well, because they're the current gorilla in the room when it comes to sales automation tools, right? And tracking your customers and tracking the leads that are coming in, and what are they doing when it comes to teaching up and down this funnel new tricks, right? When AI is there.
I mean, I think the way they are approaching it, from what I understand, their whole agent play, right, like is also around just integrating it lightly. I mean, when I say lightly, trying to integrate it in a non-invasive fashion into the already point and click user interface, right? So I don't know. I mean, they probably have professional services around this, but training is I think there is a large appetite in the market to get trained in general, both on the consumer side, mostly on the consumer side. I don't know on the business side, right? Like, I mean, depends. Organizationally, are people actually, asking for training programs? I'm not super.
All right, so I'll flip and hit you another question, which you might or might not know, but I found it interesting because in the social world, this kind of came up when social became maturing, and that is kind of like we have a social command center, right,
Uh-huh,
where you're
right.
actually watching consoles, right?
Right,
And
right.
and I look at E-Trade and kind of the trading apps that showed up when online trading became
Right.
real, and now you have online consoles. And I'm wondering if there's going to be like a sales console, because I know you have agents. You're watching.
That's right.
You're watching what's actually
Yes.
happening through all these different agents.
Yes.
And like, is there going to be like a sales command center
Yeah.
where you can actually what's actually happening and see the flow and get intelligence? And I know me and you talked about this, right, around even social intelligence and knowing when we're being attacked by a competitor,
Right.
what they're doing in the market, and
Right.
are they offering deals, sales? Because it's one thing for my sales team to be able to go out but also to know, are we being underbid, right,
Yes.
by a competitor, right?
That's
'Cause
right.
there's not a single salesman that isn't competing against somebody, right?
Yes.
And AI could actually give you that. And so where is the command center going to lay into this, right, for an org?
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, I think, but talking about Salesforce again, for example, right, like they have chosen to go with transparency, meaning, hey, look, I'm an agent, right, and I'm sending you an email, for example, right? And so if you have 30 sales reps in your company, you're a mid-sized company, and you have 30 account executives, SDRs. Now there's going to be 30 agents, right? So, and if I'm an SDR manager or head of sales, I need some visibility around it, right? Like, how are these agents performing, right? What are they doing, right? How is the human interacting with those agents? And so I think the answer is yes. Though I think some of these agents being deployed are not going to be as chaotic, so to speak, as it would be on the social side, right? I mean, with social, there's just a ton of information flying around. Now, what AI will help do is sort of tame or distill some of the sort of conversations that are going, and what sentiment analysis, etc. That currently is being done, right? But AI is just going to supercharge that, I think, big time. And yes, I think there will be some sort of a dashboard console that a CMO or a CRO will be able to leverage. And there might already be some incumbents who will try to go after the same thing, right? Like, I mean, I don't think of Salesforce dashboard as something, I mean, if you have an exec meeting every Monday morning, a startup in Palo Alto, right? Series B, yeah, you probably look at those Salesforce dashboards, but clearly they're nothing like what you would want from an AI control center. So there's going to be new instrumentation around this.
I was talking to, again, Palo Alto down at the coffee shop, talking to another guy who's building his own web app, right? He's a mobile app. He built a mobile app. It was really kind of a cool app. And he was looking, and he's like, yeah, I build it. That doesn't mean everybody's coming, right? I'm like, yeah, well, what you need to do is build a marketing campaign, right? You need a marketing campaign to let people know. And that brings me to the question for, sales automation, right? You always have a marketing campaign, and you want to get metrics on how it's performing, right? How many clicks you're getting, but also how many leads that marketing. Are you guys looking at tying that back to a particular marketing campaign to go, okay, I'm running a marketing campaign to drive engagements into the top of the funnel, then we have to process those, or maybe you're just listening. I know you guys just listen, right? But also, what about when you're actually running a campaign?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, attribution has always been sort of a big topic, right? I think continues to be, but I mean, for me personally, with agents, I see this whole thing getting flipped, right? Like, because a human doesn't have to decide, what the attribution metrics look like and what's doing well, what's not, right? Like, think of sort of an ad tech analogy, right? Like, so something that understands, all the bidding that's happening and does automated bidding, auctions, etc., right? So it's a similar analogy, I think, is going to come into the campaign world as well, right? If an AI agent has reasoning and ability to act, given the right tooling, right? Why would anybody need to go in and understand, all the attribution stuff that's going? No, I mean, so dashboards in a way are going away, so to speak, right? Agents are coming into the picture. You just have to make sure that these agents don't go rogue, or they're acting in the right spirit for your organization to in the organization's best interest, really, I think so.
The reason I think about that is that there are some companies that don't really have a lot to monitor, right? Like,
a smaller company,
a smaller company, or you're just not that exciting.
Yes.
Right? And so how do you use AI to help that situation? Well, for me, it would be tying back into campaigns.
Yes.
You have to generate some awareness. Some people have a lot of awareness, right? And there's people talking about them all the time. Then there's other companies like PipeIQ that they're new. They don't have that much going on. So and maybe this space AI really is for the bigger, mature companies, right?
Not necessarily, right? Like, I mean, I think SMB, small and medium business industry, right? SMB has different dynamics compared to mid-market, right? But are there people tackling, SMB challenges? Yes. People tackling mid-market challenges? Yes, right? And we ourselves have been sort of debating a little bit internally about, what is the right target market to go after. Because in SMB, you just don't have any infrastructure. You don't have tooling.
Right.
You don't even have any top of funnel leads or activity, as you said, right? Like campaigns. So that's kind of a more full funnel orchestration, including campaigns, right? While a mid-market player will have some existing infrastructure, has tooling, has leads coming in, downloading white papers, filling up forms, etc. Right? And that's a different sort of motion there, right? That you can leverage. So we are positioning ourselves sort of to tackle both of those challenges, but it just entirely depends on where we just find our sweet spot.
So now I have to ask: when you guys are doing POCs, right, working with customers, how much human capital do you see you need to kind of rework in order to have them extract value from PipeIQ?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so. First of all, the way we have architected our platform is to keep the amount of you can be up and running relatively quickly, right? If you're SMB or a mid-market player. So that's number one. Number two, in terms of enablement of the end user, we have tried to sort of, again, with integrations, try to make it such that all your data nothing is siloed, basically. That's number one, right? Two, they may need a little bit of training to come into the tool, light onboarding to understand how the tool works. So I don't see this as very significant. In our use case, for example, with the SDR, what the SDR is interested, or the sales development rep is interested in meetings, right? Like what he wants is people to sort of talk to and make sure, do they qualify, just a BANT qualification, for example, budget, authority, need, timeline, for example, and then hand it over to AE, right? So, yeah.
I always look at a new vendor, right? When I'm hiring new vendors, I always look like, do you have a service, and then do you have a body stapled on the side of that service that'll come in and just help me do it?
Right.
A lot of times I look at this and I want this value, but I just don't have any headcount to absorb this. So then I look for vendors that actually bring me, a person, they call them a success
professional
manager,
services, or
a success manager, or I don't like it when vendors come and go, oh, by the way, you have to hire a professional service. What I like is, hey, we're going to sell you this SaaS service, and it comes with a human element, right? It just comes. We don't. We just staple it on the side of it, so that when it comes, I'm not saying, oh, by the way, buy this, and now you have to do a PS and engagement. You're just like, no, we're going to get you going. We're you're going to buy our service, and we got a person, Bob's going to is going to come, and he's going to be there, and he's going to help you do sales, right? And then he's going to train everybody else, because they're going to see how Bob's doing. So it's a great job that everybody's going to learn from Bob, right? And I look at some of those success models where we're going to solve this for you. We've got this great tool, but hey, we're not afraid to just staple a human on it, right? And have him come in or them come in and help.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I totally get the spirit of that. I'm 2,000% behind that, right? Like, hey, we are early, we are small, right? Like, and we want to make our customers successful. So doesn't matter like what you have, don't have, right? Like if there is a good fit, right? And we believe we can make you successful, we absolutely go all out and work with the customer.
Now, it's funny I say that because you're an AI. You're supposed to be replacing people, but at the same time, there is a human element to onboard these things.
Absolutely.
But once it starts working, once everybody gets trained on it, right? And it grips a hold pretty soon. Everybody's using ChatGPT, right? Like I'll never go write something again without going and doing this, because there's been enough, right?
Yes.
You start a little campfire and you pour some kerosene on it, and eventually you get a bonfire.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, look, I think we are early in the agents game, right? Like, so there's no autopilot as yet, right? Like, so a lot of this is all human driven, right? Like more co-pilot-ish kind of motion, right? So I don't think we need to sort of sugarcoat that, or not just sugarcoat, but I mean, just the fact of the matter is humans absolutely need to be involved, and humans want transparency and auditability of these AI systems, actually, as of today.
As we come up to the 45-minute mark here, I got to ask you this, because this will transition to what keeps you up at night. But like, I'll ask you this question: do you think selling's getting easier or harder?
I think selling has definitely gotten harder in the last 2-3 years. I mean, the whole ZERP era is over. So interest rates have gone up, people spending, companies have tightened spending. I mean, overall, there's a sentiment that it's harder to, reach CIOs, CTOs, and things like that, right? To make a sale happen. Budgets have been cut. So overall, I think selling is undoubtedly harder.
because of higher interest rates and availability of capital to run these big projects or whatever you're doing.
That's right. So I think what's happening is whatever budgets are there, at least on the IT and marketing and sales side, is getting reallocated to AI to some degree, right? So there's this sort of a what do you call it, right?
Big vacuum suck of capital going, and coming over to AI.
Yeah, I think because I mean, everybody definitely has to have a story around it for sure. But not just story, but like I think I the flip side of that, I don't know, right, with the investments going in is also like Gartner, for example, is saying that we are, there's a trough of disillusionment, right, like in the hype cycle, right? Where are we in the hype cycle? So definitely we have passed the peak, right? So we are somewhere between the peak and the trough, and potentially per Gartner, we are going to hit that trough in 2026. So that's about a year and a half from now, right? So question is,
And I was talking to my coffee guys again. Right? Palo Alto is a great place to just learn everything about everything by just going to the pizza and having coffee with people. But they were saying, look, over time, this could replace salesmen, right? Like, and I know we don't want to talk about that, right? But in a real sense, like the way we're doing selling, right, might change because look, there were not only Notebook LM, right, but they were telling me about look, at their company, they're making full-on sales presentations, guys standing up in front of cameras, and they were running these things, and people were like, "Oh, how do I book that guy? How do I have him come, get in front of my customers too? Because that's a great presentation. We really are. They wanted to book the guy, and it was completely AI generated guy. There was no guy, right? You watched, they had no idea. It was on stage. He was doing a whole presentation on stage about the product, and it was brilliant, right? And the rest of the company is like, yeah, we want to book this guy and like in front of 17 other customers, and he's like, yeah, it doesn't. That's just all AI generated.
Yes.
Right? And sure, we can book them. We can book them everywhere, right? And that's when you realize, oh, subtly, this could actually replace some of the jobs that are out there. Just like Notebook LM does great podcasts, right? Like I could see where over time, if the tools got good enough, right, that you would just have the ability to, convince people that this is what you want to buy. Here's all the questions you need in interaction. It was a human interaction. I didn't even know it wasn't a human. And then it figured out process and got it down to the bottom of the funnel where they closed the deal.
Right.
And I went somewhere and paid for the product. And you can see that coming down the road. So selling might get harder but it also might get easier once AI really jumps in.
Yeah. I mean, so I think definitely there's going to be retooling, right? Like as we have seen with past sort of revolution, whatever, not revolution, but like the industrial sort of in the 70s or 80s with the car industry, for example. I mean, you're from, Cleveland, Ohio, so firsthand, right? Like what that means, right? So there's definitely going to be reskilling, right? There's no doubt about it, right? There's going to be reskilling. AI is going to do certain things that, humans currently do, but that just means like much greater opportunity, I think, for humans to do, parts of the value stack that AI cannot do, right? Even 5 years from now, 3 years from now, who knows what that is, right?
I honestly think I'm thinking that the more we think about this, the more I think that, a Tesla, I don't go haggle with a salesman anymore. Right? You go online, you order the car, there's the car it is. When I buy things on Amazon now, I don't have to go to the store and talk to a salesperson. No, I just go there and I buy it online, clickety-click, it shows up, right? And so that sales, the sales process might revolutionize enough with AI and with all the tools that sooner or later, the purchase cycle will be a different purchase cycle.
It'll be a different purchase cycle, right? I mean, certainly some sales motions are easier to automate than others, let's just say, right? Like on the SMB side, perhaps like a product-led growth motion, right? It lends itself more so to where, you're CAC, customer acquisition cost, is pretty high. So anyways, you can't probably have a human in the loop. But there, in that case, the AI generated avatar, right, that's having a conversation might make a ton of sense, right? Again, with full sort of disclosure and so on and so forth, right, where the buyer knows who she or she is talking to. Yeah.
The other thing I've seen happen, which Broadcom is doing with their product set, because they acquired VMware, they just took the number of SKUs from 800 down to 4. And they just said, look, this is the way we're going to sell in the future. It's going to be a one-click sell. It's going to be a simple sales cycle, right? We're going to automate it. We're just going to make it, and that means that we're not going to give people a lot of choice. We're going to intentionally make it here. It's the red button. You hit it. This is what you get, and we'll make the price such that it's advantageous for you to hit the red button. It might be a little more expensive, but you're going to get a lot more because there's only one product now. There used to be 800 products, and they bundle them all together. And so you could see where companies that are selling things might change their product SKUs, what they're offering, to align itself to just a simpler automated sales cycle. Right?
Yes.
And there's a piece of that, right? That we're still burdened with the existing model numbers and product offerings that came when you didn't have AI, you didn't have bots that sold things. And really, the sales cycle is about learning the products and the options that you want to purchase, right? But if you make the options and what you're purchasing tailored to an AI sale, you could see that actually happening as well.
Yes.
And I see that at Broadcom.
I mean, I think AI may. I mean, I think complexity. First of all, I think is probably not good for selling in general, right?
Sure.
Like, I mean, that's what.
Well, I don't know. It's good if you're a salesman. Right? Complexity is great.
You
job
have
security.
That's true. And I think AI can probably do a really good job of that. Wherever there is complexity, it probably can. Imagine if I had an agent that works on my behalf and can go into Amazon and find the best price of a particular product, like amongst a plethora of choices, right? Like, I mean, the way I choose right now is just go for the top choice amongst the best sellers and something that has thousands of stars and just grab it, right? Like, so social proof. But yeah, maybe something there's out there that's even better and so on and so forth. So an agent that can actually crunch a lot of information, which is what I think an agent can do, right? AI can do, is something that a human cannot. So, I mean, there's a role there, I think, for a complex sale where AI can probably play an interesting part. But complex sales also require humans. So it's kind of interesting interplay.
Yeah, it is. And, corporate dashboards, sales dashboards, command centers. Right. Be interesting to see how all this plays out. Right?
Yes.
All right, so we're coming up to the last 10 minutes of the show, and it's been great to spend a Sunday afternoon with you, Rajesh.
Hey, thank you.
For me, as we talk about like what's happening that excites you versus what happened in the last week that gets you excited. I'll start first. I know I mentioned this at the beginning, right? And this is not really AI, but it is AI because Elon Musk is always AI. So he launched Starship, right? It launched. It took off. The thing landed back in the chopsticks, right? Amazing. Like so all of a sudden now we got rockets that'll take off. Send a Starship up, which is the biggest, giantest thing you can actually. That thing could go to Mars, right? They got to refuel it and all that kind of stuff. But it is a monster of a ship, right? But just the compute and guidance system that's pretty smart to be able to, and that they're going to put AI in that because if you're going to be to Mars, it better be damn smart, right? Because there's going to be a lot of stuff that comes up that they're going to have to deal with. It's just another instance of look at how technology and Silicon Valley has reached in and changed even the space industry, right? And I look at technology that's being applied in places and I go, I want to stay alive for another 30 years just so I can watch what plays out in AI and robotics and physical things because there's one thing AI, helps write new documents or whatever. It's another thing when you put it in an Android, right? Yes. Like I want to buy one of these dogs, right? You see these really cool dogs that are out now and you can get them for under 10 grand, right? They're affordable for a person. And I don't want a dog. I love dogs, but a robot dog might be interesting. I don't have to feed it. I just got to plug it in. If you look at this and then, we talk AI, we're talking AI and web properties and business automation, but I'm looking at AI and that's what's exciting me is how AI now is starting to affect real things, whether it's self-driving cars, whether it's truck deliveries that are going to deliver your workloads across the nation. For me, that's exciting.
Yeah, no, even I mean, like mental health, right? Like therapy, AI therapists, something that can converse with you, for example. I mean, you can pretty much do that with ChatGPT, I guess. But, I mean, that kind of brings into the question of guardrails. We should talk about guardrails maybe next week, just how do you make sure that, a particular AI agent, kind of has certain controls. But anyways, no, I think the Tesla, I mean, this is the rocket, landing. I mean, just reminded me, honestly, human ingenuity and what is the human mind is capable of. It's just incredible, right? And I think one good book recommendation, if folks haven't read it, viewers, is a book called Sapiens, Yuval Harari. Just kind of maps human history and like when humans first created, I don't know, like tools with from stone and so on, right? Like that's the genesis of how the human mind has evolved over time to make these complex systems of sending things to the moon and landing a rocket back. It's just
pretty cool.
Blows your mind.
And but then it gets back to like how much AI is built into that, right? Like how much did and how much AI generated the circuit boards that control the avionics, right? Like we assume that humans wrote all that, right, and are building that. But when does AI actually start building things that we couldn't build?
Right.
Or finding disease that we couldn't find, right? And that's also happening. So those kind of things excite me. I don't know what excites you. I'll throw the question back at you.
I mean, I think code writing code. I mean, writing code is nothing but code writing code. I mean, that sounds super exciting for me. Like spinning up apps in no time, right? And experimenting with things is a pretty cool capability, right? I mean, for me,
and I think we should frame this because we're going to do these podcasts every week. Right? So we should frame it of what happened in the last week that excited you.
That's
right? Because we can always talk about generic high level things that excite us,
right?
Because there's big topics, of course.
Yes.
But for me, what excited me was just watching that launch, right? And now I'm not sure what I'm going to pay attention to, right? Because great, he launched it. It launched it. It landed. The chopsticks caught it, and the other ship went in orbit. The Starship went in orbit and then deorbited, came down and landed in the ocean. Right. Like exactly as planned.
Right. I mean, I would catch that as a highlight as well, honestly. Right. Again, such a massive feat, actually, human endeavor. Right. Like he's amazing. So he just seems to take on these impossible projects. And
anything scare you this week? Anything you heard that you went, oh no?
No, I don't know. I mean, I think the macro, looking at some of the Gartner stuff was a tad disappointing in the sense that, funding, for example, overall, they said is down 40% in 22, another 40% down in 23, and it's going to be 23, 24, right? It's 40% down each year, and 25 is up just 2.5%. So basically flat. So I think we are still in the sort of throes of the macro environment, and liquidity going back to LPs, limited partners, is still sort of doesn't look very great. I don't know how quickly it's going to improve.
I think we're having a pendulum swing from COVID, right? I think COVID spent a ton of money on digital properties and digital everything because everybody was stuck at home, right? And then the pendulum swung way back over where they started to raise interest rates and people started to travel and they weren't buying digital property stuff anymore, right? And so and I think it's kind of swinging all over the place right now. I think the economy and the election and everything else that's happening has just been kind of the pendulum swinging back and forth, right and left. Nobody knows where any of it's going, and that means that from a macro perspective, people are timid on where they're going to invest and how much they're going to invest. Right. As the pendulum stops swinging as much, and we put more and more years behind COVID, I don't know. Nobody talks about COVID anymore, right? Like we're not saying, we shouldn't go out and have coffee.
Human memory is short. Human memory is super short.
and again, we were talking at Pete's in downtown Palo Alto, in Town and Country. And by the way, if you ever want to come by and say hello, you're in the Bay Area. I'm always there every morning, 9 a.m. I'll be sitting at a table. You can go find me. You can look at what we look like because we do live stream this. We do have video cameras. You're probably listening to this on iTunes or LinkedIn, but we do have cameras set up. So feel free if you're over at Palo Alto, in the mornings, 8 a.m. to usually 10. I'm around talking to a bunch of Silicon Valley geekies, right? And I forget what the topic was I was going to say. I forget what I was going to say.
Guardrails, maybe. I don't know,
Yeah,
for next
no,
week, perhaps.
I
I don't know. Yeah.
no, but anyway, come say hello if you're there. Give the podcast a follow. We are on,
Yes.
I believe, iTunes and
Spotify and YouTube.
YouTube and LinkedIn.
Yes.
And so there's ways to follow you so you can get notification. I think that YouTube you can get notification, Spotify you can get notification. So as we do episodes, you can follow along, give us a link, a follow, and then get notified when we do episodes. We do them every Sunday. I call it the AI Church, but that's just because I'm kind of an agnostic kind of guy. If you go to your own church, you can do that. I'm a techno geek, and Rajesh is just a great AI guy. For next week, AI costs. So what's on the agenda for next week is AI costs.
Yeah.
How much are these models costing? The big models, the medium models, the little models. How are people going to afford this? Power consumption, server scale out. We were talking again at the Pete's Coffee about nuclear power plants and the Bill Gates's efficient, non-destroyable nuclear power plants. And how are we going to generate enough power? What are the costs associated with these larger models and then dynamic models that have to be completely be calculated continuously? What does this cost footprint look like, and who's going to pay it? Right. So that's on for next week's show. It should be fun. We'll get to chat about that. I'm sure we'll talk about to our brain trusts throughout Silicon Valley, and maybe get a new guest in and
Yes.
spend time together next Sunday on AI costs. What do you got to worry about when you're talking about budgets and how much is going to cost you versus how much is going to cost the industry, and where the heck is all this power going to come from? So it should be fun.
Cool.
Rajesh, thanks a lot for being here. Good show.
Thank you, Eric.
Enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And we'll be
It's a
back
lot of fun.
back again next week. Until then, everybody go get some coffee and say hello to your friends.
All right. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.